Connecting. Gotta love YouTube. All right, welcome to episode 21 of Haven of Horror. We have another guest star this week, David Lynch, not Conner Nielsen. I've been working on that joke all week. But welcome to the show, man. It's always good to have you on.
Ideas are like fish, okay? You catch them, all right? Yeah, no, I'm glad to be here. Really happy to talk about a new movie that I finally got to watch for the first time and one of my favorite horror movies. So, really excited to hear your guys' thoughts as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited that I finally watched this because I'm a big Wes Craven fan, of course. Nightmare and Scream are like two of the best slasher films ever made. And I've seen Hills Have Eyes a couple times. But we're going to do it a little differently today. First, to start off, we're doing next week. Nick and I have been talking, and we decided to do a couple of bad movies. So I figured, well, if we're going to do bad movies, we're going to do terrible, awful, I hate that this exists movies. We're going to do the 2005 remake of The Fog and 2008's Dawn or Day of the Dead. Should be a lot of fun until Milton quits because the movies are terrible. The look on his face says it all.
Well, we've had a lot of good ones, so we have to put some variety in the show, right?
So I have to ask, because right before we started, you said you thought you knew what they were. Were you close?
I knew that you were probably going to pick the Day of the Dead remake. I did not think you were going to pick the remake for The Fog.
Okay.
So
you can actually blame Connor for that one because we watched People Under the Stairs. If you didn't catch the title, which has Bing Rames, and it got me to thinking about the Day of the Dead remake, which also has Bing. So I was like, you know what, we should do that one because we just covered Day of the Dead a couple weeks ago. But yeah, so we always take a few minutes whenever we have a new guest star on. What are some of your favorite just horror films in the horror genre? Like, how do you feel about that genre?
So, horror, it's not typically a genre that I see a lot of films that I love, but when I do find ones that I love, they become some of my all-time favorites, and I go back to them more often than I go to a lot of other movies. So I typically kind of like the spectacle horror movies where there's like a sort of bigness to them. I like Cloverfield quite a bit. I really like the original Godzilla, where it's like something's happening where it's almost like an event is happening, and you can like feel like the terror in the air. There's almost like a spectacle to it. And then I also like pretty goofy horror movies as well. Like we're gonna talk about The People Under the Stairs. It's basically a comedy. It's like an Amblin Entertainment, like Spielberg kind of, like it's like the Ghetto Goonies kind of, and then there's like cannibalism, disembowelment, in like blood and all that kind of stuff. But I also really like the original Dawn of the Dead. I think is probably the greatest horror movie that's ever been made. This as far as the story it tells and the way it uses its genre to like elevate the material. Like I think it is so good. It's funny, it's sad, it's kind of heartbreaking, but it's heartwarming. It's just everything you could want in a movie is in the original Dawn of the Dead. But I think my favorite horror movie is probably Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which is David Lynch's prequel to his TV show. And that's a movie that is just so sad. It's probably the saddest horror movie I've seen. And the way that movie, because David Lynch, whenever he makes a movie, there's like an element of irony that's kind of in it. There's a sort of, you kind of look at it where a little bit more than the characters, and the style sort of has a little bit of distance between the characters and exactly what they're feeling. You have a little bit more knowledge than they do. And I know some people feel like that kind of disengages them from the story. I think the atmosphere does a really good job of keeping one engaged, but that's one where you are just inside of Laura Palmer's head for the whole movie. Most of the movie, the first half an hour is a comedy bit, but after that, you're just with her. There's not a scene without her. You're just with her the whole time as you're going through all of the trauma she's going through, and it's heartbreaking and terrifying. And so those are like, so there's a bit of like a kind of a gambit of horror I like. I like the really personal hells that people are in, but I also really like the fun stuff. I forgot to mention The Lost Boys, if that's considered a a horror movie, but The Lost Boys is just something I've seen in like 4 times in the last year alone. So I like very colorful, very fast paced, generally unpredictable horror movies, and that's I guess generally my avenue with that genre.
Yeah, I agree with you. Dawn of the Dead, I consider my second favorite ever. First, of course, is Evil Dead 2 because that's a masterpiece. Like,
And I forgot to mention the Evil Dead movies. I've only seen the first two. I've not seen Army of Darkness in the show, but like the way Raimi moves that camera is just so energetic, and you're just like you're in it. You're on the edge of your seat. It's so entertaining.
yeah. But yeah, I like both spectrums. About the only genre with sub genre within the Grey Area, like typically is possession. They tend to be the same thing. Hereditary being the exception. I love that.
Hereditary is awesome, but you're right. No, like possession movies. Maybe it's because they've been ruling the genre for like the last decade or something. But oh my god, if I have to watch another scene of some dumbass slowly walking their ass down a hallway, I'm gonna shoot myself. Like like, did you guys see The Curse of La Llorona? Where it was
No,
I have not.
I like to avoid stuff like that.
It's like I timed it. There's a 2.5 minute scene where you're just following Linda Cardellini around your house, and she's like, "What was that noise? Oh my god, a light turned off. Oh my god!" I'm like, Jesus, let's get this going. And the demons are always dumb as a box of rocks. So.
Yeah, we're about to get like another movie about possession, but it's like based on a true story of a court case where someone tried to argue that. It's like, yeah, that didn't happen.
It's already out and it's terrible. You're talking about The Conjuring 3. And actually, that really did happen. It's just not the way the movie presents.
Well, that's what I mean, essentially.
But that's how all those Conjuring films are. Like they all. I want to go back and watch the first two because I know Connery said at least they're fun. Like he enjoys some fun a lot. But the third one, oh god, that was the worst movie I've seen this year.
I'm nervous about that third one, man, because I do like the first two. The first one in particular, I have a very fond like memories of that, where that came out right after I graduated high school. And for anyone who might be younger watching or listening to this, when you graduate high school, that summer afterwards is like the best summer ever. You're like invincible. And I went to Lake Tahoe, and we had to go into like the back of this really rundown casino. My mom called it like the place where dreams go to die in Lake Tahoe. And they had like this movie theater in the back with like pale lighting and narrow hallways and minimal staff that clearly didn't want to be there with like, gaunt faces. And we sat down in the auditorium, my brother and I, and there was like tiles missing from the ceiling and a big water stain on the wall and a big family that just came and sat down behind us. At one point, like the dad got a phone, was like, "Yeah, I'm watching a horror movie. What's the big deal?" And that was just like a great time. And like I didn't grow up watching horror movies, so like the first one I actually saw in a theater was The Woman in Black, which like scared the bejesus out of me because I didn't know any of the rules. I didn't know what the tricks were, and I'd only seen like a handful of horror movies in the interim. So when I went to go see The Conjuring, it was just like, oh, whoa, okay, that was spooky. It didn't like scare me, but it was such a fun ride to go along with it. And I think James Wan is really kind of good at making that like entertainment horror that's not going to stay with you like something like Hereditary will, John. But it's flashy, it gets the job done, and I have like those fond memories attached to the first two, anyways. But I'm really nervous about the third one because that same guy made La Llorona, and that movie's a pile of crap.
I mean, the third one sucks. Connor will block me immediately when I give those first two like a 1-star review.
John, we've been through the Nostalgia Critic trilogy together.
Yeah.
All right, we're like war brothers. Okay.
All right, so we do really do these by order of release date. So we're gonna start with The Hills Have Eyes. So Milton, tell us a little bit about Wes Craven's Hills Have Eyes.
I'd like to pass on this because I think I might have forgotten quite a bit of it, unfortunately. I'll try my best to at least describe the beginning. A group of campers, no, sorry, not campers, I should say campers. A group of family that wants to go to California, essentially, through an RV, decide to very poorly ignore the warnings of a an older man who knows the area and decides to enter a bomb testing range for the military, especially the Air Force. And naturally, of course, they go off course. Their RV gets stuck, and the entire family has to deal with mutants that want to kill them because they're cannibals. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you say you don't remember a lot of it, but I mean that's the premise of the movie. That's all I want.
The reason why is because I've forgotten the ending. Because admittedly, I don't want to go down on this movie too much, but I did sleep through a bit of the end.
Wow.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
I think this is a decent movie. I think the premise is held back by when it came out. Not to say that like the movie does do the best it can, but in the '70s, for the kind of story they're telling, roots that they make these people out to be, I just don't think audiences were ready to have that kind of thing on film. I like a couple of them, especially the guy that's like on the poster. I can't remember any of their names. It's a terrible name. But I like that actor a lot. I like the one guy that's got like the split down his nose. Some really good makeup there. But some of them, like, you start out with the little girl that's like trying to run away, and they're like, "Oh, you're a mutant." I'm like, "She's just like dirty. Like, what's her? How is she a mutant? Like, what?" So since this was your first time viewing it, what do you think of The Hills Have?
I quite liked it. I had a similar experience watching it to when I watched The People Under the Stairs for the first time, which was, it starts off and I'm like, oh, okay, you got the premise and there's a few of like the horror scenes. I'm like, okay, I've seen this before. Okay, we're gonna kill a couple minutes watching people walk around. Okay, whatever. But once the ball got rolling, I actually found it to be quite entertaining, and the second half in particular, I found to be like A+ bad taste. Like it is like sleazy and so kind of nasty, and like that whole sequence where are we going to spoilers? Do we is that cool?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
Um,
can enter into these at any time.
okay, when they steal the baby, that whole sequence was like wickedly entertaining in a really kind of sleazy, gross way, and uh, in the way it's shot is almost like a snuff film because that's where I feel like the low budget I think really started to add to the experience of watching it, and I like and so by the time I got to the end of it, I was like kind of picking up on sort of like the foreshadowing they were doing with like the dogs, and I thought that it was actually pretty satisfying in the end. So I'd actually give it a pretty solid thumbs up. I liked it quite a bit.
yeah. I'm with you. I love. Part of me loves just those like sleazy '70s horror. They have a feeling that can't be uh like done again. Because cheap movies to nowadays are just like, oh, we have no money and here's like $2 CGI. Great.
It's all shot on digital, which is
Yeah.
definitely very different.
This movie was only made for anywhere from 350 to $700,000. It's crazy. That's the budget. That's around the budget of like that first thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember. I think this might be Wes Craven's. No, this is not Wes Craven's first movie. This is his second and third. He did The Last House on the Left. They're going to talk about it a little bit because I was getting some of those vibes, a less serious vibes from there. Uh, but yeah, I mean, this is classic. Just we take a simple premise. We have no money. We're gonna just do what the hell are you doing? We're just gonna make a movie. Uh, there's some horrifying stuff, and you're like, I forgot about the crucifixion scene, and I could not believe that was like in a '70s movie, especially like Dawn of the Dead. Because even in Dawn of the Dead, some of the gore I think is purposely made to look as realistic as it could be because it was the '70s. We had to wait until the '80s. Um, but the special effects hold up. Other than like I said, the mutants, they don't look like mutants. Other than the one guy that's got like it's like somebody just like cut his skin open or something.
Yeah, I
Um,
think the backstory with that was like he got hit in the face with a tire iron by his dad, and
Oh, that's
like
right.
has that,
Yeah, he.
uh,
I think he's the first one. I think. Yeah. Um, based on
Papa
what the
Jupiter.
old man was saying.
Yeah, because that's what the old man is like rambling about. My favorite exchange in that movie is when the dad, who's like an awful human being in this movie, he like goes to the police station to or not the police station, the gas station looking for help, and he finds the guy like trying to hang himself, and he's like, "Oh, I thought you were like an intruder or something." He's like, "So you tried to hang yourself?"
It is a pretty funny exchange. Just like, why would your response be as soon as I come into this building?
I think he
Uh,
said he thought it was Papa Jupiter coming to get him, so he would
Yeah.
rather hang himself than deal with him. But it's a really funny exchange.
that
I
was his second response. His first one was because he's trying to like deflect, like because he's still trying to hide the existence of the meat. So he's like, "Oh, I thought you were an intruder or something." And I was
oh
like,
yeah,
"What?"
that guy made me laugh. Like he's like the first character we see, and he's just like
Hmm.
old man, just like throwing out expletives. And like, oh crap, and he's like trying to drink, he's like run out of alcohol to drink and everything. That got a good laugh out of me.
Yeah, he reminded me of. I know you haven't seen like I think, but in Friday the 13th Part Six, one of the characters that we follow for a while is like the Undertaker of this graveyard, and he's like an old man that just kind of mumbles to himself and just like drinking. And that movie is almost like a promo too. It's very self aware horror. So I've always wondered. Now I'm wondering, if they're kind of referencing that because we get a couple other like Wes Craven references.
Oh,
So I was cracking up because it just reminded me of that movie.
um, yeah, so one thing I took note of was like the actors in this. For a no budget movie, not like the only actor who went on to be in more than like 12 projects total was the mutant that's on the poster, the bald guy. I think his name is Pluto. He's been in other stuff, but everybody looks like somebody else. And when it was like doing the cast, it was like I thought it said with James Whitmore, and I was like, oh my, they got James Whitmore in this. He's from Planet of the Apes, Shawshank Redemption. Like that dude's amazing. They got him. That's great. And then like the leader of the mutants shows up, and it looked kind of like a young James Whitmore. And then I was looking him up. I'm like, I can't believe he was in Hills Have Eyes, and it's James Whitworth. It's a very similar but different name. And I was like, oh, he kind of does look like James Whitmore, but he also
Hmm.
kind of looks like Dennis Hopper. He also kind of looks like the bad guy from the first Mad Max movie. He kind of has
Oh
this
yeah.
vague resemblance to other people. But I thought that
Yeah.
the husband of one of the daughters looked like what Nick Cage would look like in the next decade, and I thought that the brother, the kind of Luke Skywalker looking kid, looked a lot like proto Chris Pine, like Chris Pine in high school with like his eyes and his brow and his chin and stuff. And it was just kind of funny. And then the blonde chick looked a lot like Sybil Shepherd, who I think they probably cast because she looked like Sybil Shepherd. So
You're talking about
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
the
yeah,
younger.
yeah.
Okay. Well,
Randy,
I
is his
mean,
name?
also need to be noted, Dee Wallace,
Yes.
uh,
Yeah.
who will forever just be Elliot's mom from E.T. uh,
80s mom. Yeah, she is.
yeah,
80s
uh,
mom. Yeah. 80s single
Gremlins.
mom.
Uh, funnily enough, the two like biggest names in this quote, the guy on the poster whose name and Dee Wallace also would later be in Rob Zombie films. Because of
Really?
course Rob Zombie, yeah. So Rob Zombie, of course, loves to take those '70s and '80s horror icons that aren't really getting work anymore. Like here, I've got a movie. Dee Wallace plays a witch in Lords of Salem, and Michael Berryman, that's his name. Of course, famously plays Tiny. Get it? He's tall, but in House of Thousand Corpses and Devil's Midnight.
Okay, cool. That
Yeah, that's
for whatever reason I thought the actor's name was Lorenzo, but then I realized that the guy who plays that role in the remake has also been in a lot of stuff. He was in Twin Peaks season 3, and he played a character named Lorenzo in that. So I feel like my mind just all of a sudden was forgetting which name associated with what actor in what movie.
Yeah. The my favorite part of the remake is that they got Ted Levine, I think his name was. Yeah, Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs to play the dad, the cop dad.
Oh,
It's
that's great.
Yeah, it's great. This is like we mentioned before, really brutal for a '70s movie. You got like the crucifixion scene, and like they actually show them like pounding the wood stake into the hands, and like, oh, God, that's kind of painful. They burn him alive, of course. I was surprised they killed Dee Wallace because I would have thought in a traditional movie he's the main character, right? Like he's going after her baby and trying to save him, but it's the dad instead. I think that was an interesting choice. Uh, this movie, of course, also spawned, I think, almost a subgenre of horror about like cannibalistic mutants in isolated places. Because you got this, you got Wrong Turn, all like 600 of those things.
I think I saw a Blu-ray combo pack at Best Buy that was like Wrong Turn 1 through 7, just on the cover.
Yeah, and like most franchises, that first one's the only one worth watching.
Yeah, oh, sorry, what were you saying?
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it was kind of neat because I've actually driven through the Nevada desert before, and so it was kind of neat to see the way they utilize the location, and how isolated it feels. Like early on when uh, Luke Skywalker, Chris Pine guy goes out looking for one of the dogs. Uh, that scene is one of those scenes that it typically like kind of annoys me in a horror movie where it's somebody calling somebody's name as they walk around for a few minutes, looking for somebody or hearing a noise. But the way the cinematography does, they're using long lenses and they'll like zoom out and you see how big the hills are and how small the people are, and it does sort of add to that sense of isolation, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and I was right. This is his second film. Interesting that because I was just reading a little bit on the development of this movie. Craven didn't want to do like just horror. He found the genre like teacher training, but nobody would like pay him to make anything but a horror movie because he'd only had one film to his Last House on Left, which is kind of like a rape revenge exploitation thing. Interesting enough, produced by Sean S. Cunningham. So I really wanted to do that just because those two guys who were big in the splatter genre, and one of them's talented. Make this rip off, but that's beside the point. But the thing with Wes Craven is he always pulled his story ideas and his movie ideas from real things or like actual fairy tales and stuff. And he talked about like being kind of influenced by Hansel and Gretel, because that was the original idea, to do like a horror version of that. And I don't see it on here, but my dad always told me that there was actually like real story about like mutant people in the desert after being able to do the testing. So that inspired a lot of these, cannibal films. I can't believe that that's like a genre. You got mutant cannibal films. Nothing could surprise me though. I mean, if there's something, that's probably a genre.
Yeah.
It definitely appeals to like a sense of fear of consumption and the fact that we humans could be consumed by something. It's horrifying if it could be another person. Certainly,
Yeah.
well, it speaks of something primal.
And when the old man is giving like the backstory about how he had one kid, and like it was a baby girl and she was beautiful, like perfect, and then several years later they tried again for a second baby and it was this like scary monster man that was like 20 pounds and hairy and basically a mutant that came out sideways. Um, it sort of is interesting because they don't really say it, but the nuclear testing was probably related to that mutation and how the neighborhood that they were living in was once perfect and fine, and now it's all derelict and gross. And that sort of mutation from one thing to the next was probably birthed with like that mutant baby. And I don't know. I think there's like something that Wes Craven's maybe trying to get off his chest or say something about how like small towns are like changing and the way they're kind of used to just like cannon fodder by like testing and the people who are like in the military or trying to produce weapons or like government or whatever like doesn't care about their citizens, and there's something like really kind of nihilistic and kind of like downbeat about that I think is pretty in line with something like that Craven probably his line of work kind of follows that, I think.
Yeah. Hey Noah, thanks for stopping by, man. Always good to see. Um, yeah, I never picked up on how subtle it is in this movie because I have kind of the remake in my mind because I've seen it quite a few times. I saw that in theaters actually, and that's a lot less subtle about it. Like they just come out and say, "Oh, this is a testing," stuff like that, which is fine. Like
Yeah.
the movie is like the remake is shot for shot. This movie because they're a lot. I appreciate it because it helps tell the concept, and they get a little more creative with something. Uh, so now I'm curious because this is the first time Milton has not remembered a movie. Was it that boring?
I don't know what it was about it because I've seen old movies and I've seen like old exploitation horror before. There was something about the antagonist to me that just didn't seem very intimidating as compared to some of the other films that we've seen. And I saw like People Under the Stairs first before I saw this one. I don't know. There was something about these. I guess something about these cannibals seemed mundane, and I guess it didn't hold my interest. I guess as much. But then again, that I think is a matter of taste in some ways.
I'd be interested to see what you think of the. We'll have to do that soon.
Yeah. But one of the things that I did find interesting was the fact that in some ways it seemed more intimidating this Nevada desert during the day rather than during the night. And that's even despite the crucifixion scene, which is definitely very brutal. It's just more of like the last third that I just don't remember very well, unfortunately. Also because I was like in and out and sleep for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe it was some of the pacing because it's definitely not a quick start at the beginning. It's definitely a slow burn, but it gets gradually more and more involved. Um, it was definitely interesting seeing the order of the characters' deaths because as you said, yeah, normally babies captured. Usually, a horror convention is the mother is the person that would go after it in some like revenge rescue quest or something like that. But no, it happens that the people who are absent during the presence of these mutants are those who are more likely to survive, which is interesting.
What else to say? I mean, about this movie, it's a very simple premise. There's execution, well done. R.I.P. Wes Craven. He was a genius. He'll full of himself sometimes, but have you ever like looked at interviews with him?
I have not actually.
I have the like making of Friday the 13th based at Freddy documentary. He's like, yeah, I didn't even Freddy based at there's nothing in that. Watch it. It's great.
And he knows this because he hasn't seen it.
Yeah.
And well, what you were talking about, Milton, was interesting because you were saying that there was something about the antagonist wasn't grabbing you, and I think part of that is because a lot of this movie is about savagery, and when you were talking about earlier, John, is that the '70s audience is not willing to accept certain things, and this movie struck me as very similar to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I don't know if you guys, I'm sure John has seen that. I don't know if you've seen it, Milton.
I have not seen it yet. It's on our list, though.
That movie is like watching a nightmare. Like I think it is the scariest horror movie that's ever been made. Like I love it. But I've also seen like clips from the remake where it is just so aggressive and in your face, and everyone's like, like screaming and all that, and so I kind of that makes me like kind of giggle a little bit when I think about it. But with that, like there's like a kind of a helplessness and like people trying to escape an isolated area in that movie. And that's a similar thing here. This is here, right? Okay, cool.
You're back with us.
But yeah, you saw Conner Nielsen there probably for a second. My little Discord avatar. But with this though, I think maybe I would be interested in watching the remake, John, because seeing how something in that era, which is more like you're allowed to be more aggressive and like savagery, there's like a tolerance for that in the zeitgeist that wasn't there 30 years prior. So I would be interested in checking that out. I like the director, all right, the Alexandra Asia, whatever his name is, but yeah, one thing I do like about this movie though is I think there is like some kind of foreshadowing that the movie I think is maybe trying to say something. Maybe it is just an idea and they're not trying to say anything at all. But so they have two dogs. They have Beauty and they have Beast. And Beauty dies almost instantly, and then Beast. Uh, by the way, easy pick for a top 5 movie dogs. I love Beast. Beast gets it done. All right. Now there's some like connective tissue between Hills Have Eyes and People Under the Stairs. One of which are very involved dogs. So, but like Beast, but obviously, like within humanity, there's Beauty and there's Beast, and when Beauty goes away, they become more savage. But the Beauty is a lady, and she dies very quickly. And what I noticed is like during that scene halfway through the movie, they take out almost all of the ladies like immediately. Like Dee Wallace, bam, you're dead. Mom, bam, you're dead. Um, not Sybil Shepherd is like raped. Like it is a really upsetting scene where it is like, oh my god, like what's gonna happen? And then so Cop Dad is kind of taken out, but then Mustache Dad and Luke Skywalker and Brandy, who does get to stick around for the rest of the movie. Thankfully, it's not like she just you know disappears. But they kind of have to step up and take on new roles and like find their inner savagery in order to take it out. And I think that kind of plays all the way out to the final shot where you see like mustache Nick Cage looking guy like stabbing into the camera and his like spits getting on the lens, and it's really kind of nasty and like sleazy, and I was all there for it. It's one of those scenes that make you go, God, I love the 70s. It's up there with the part in Star Wars where they're shooting everybody in the containment center, or at the beginning of Dawn of the Dead where they're just shooting and yelling and everyone's firing and it's all loud. I'm like, yes, the 70s.
I love that apartment building. See Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, it's crazy.
My final thoughts are to shout out as well to the poster. I love the poster for the original movie where it's just that guy like staring into your soul and like I just the hills have eyes. I miss when movie posters were like great.
Yes. It's not just floating heads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the last thing we always do before we move on to the next film is give it a score out of 5. Excuse me, the letterbox system. I'm gonna stick with what I put on Letterboxd and give it 3.5.
I would also give it a 3.5.
I will also give it a 3.5. I need to see it again so I can actually, stay conscious for like the last portion of it. I think it was just that the time in which I was watching it was I probably just wasn't ready for the full thing. So just a tentative score, which I would probably change later.
Stay awake during the fucking movies. All right, and now for the most un-Wes Craven movie I think I've ever seen. Since this was Connor's pick, I'm going to let him tell us about The People Under the Stairs.
Okay, so The People Under the Stairs follows Poindexter Fool, as he is called regularly. He has just turned 13 years old, and his family is about to be evicted from their tenement. And this tenement, they are the last family that is staying there before they get evicted. But once they get evicted, the landlords are going to tear it down, turn it into condominiums. And the landlords are played by Everett McGill and Wendy Roby from Twin Peaks. They were actually cast because of Twin Peaks. And they're the landlords. And then one of Dexter's sister's friends, Leroy, played by the always amazing Ving Rhames, is a local thug. And he says, you know what, kid, I'm teaching you a trade. We're going to go rob that house because inside that house there's some gold coins. And from there, they get inside the house and they can't get out. And so that's basically the premise of The People Under the Stairs. I'm very excited to know what you guys thought about this.
You were very right to compare it to a Spielberg film. That was definitely the vibes that I was getting throughout this thing. It's definitely also very interesting because I think it plays with the horror genre because it knows what the horror genre is and what people's general expectations are. You call a movie The People Under the Stairs, you think that they're the main threat because it's these weird people that live under the stairs, but they're actually more just victims, honestly. And they're not really the main source of danger that Poindexter has to face throughout this movie. It's the people who are above the stairs that aren't. Yeah. It's it's definitely interesting to see how it kind of plays with it subverts expectations in a way that is actually conducive to the writing of the movie.
I just have to say the '90s may be Wes Craven's like best period of directing films ever. This New Nightmare came out 3 years later. Scream 2, like those are all fantastic movies. But like I said, this is the most Wes Craven movie I have ever seen. In a good way. And it kind of reminded me because it's, people like trapped in a house. So it's like, it's kind of full circle because his first movie was The Last House on the Left, which I don't know if you guys have seen. I know Milton probably has, but I don't know if you've seen that. But that is another like exploitation grindhouse movie about a bunch of criminals who are stuck in the house of the people whose daughter they raped and killed. And the parents decide to get revenge. So like, okay, so he's going back to the people stuck in the house, but making it more absurd, which I guess is the only thing I can think of to describe this movie. And I loved it. This might be a new favorite from Wes Craven. Not my favorite, but a new favorite.
Yeah, I really like this movie too, honestly. Yeah, there's quite a bit that I could say about this movie. It's got great production design. It definitely goes along with the theme of like being a prisoner within a situation. The people who are the most likely to be prisoners in the movie are actually the antagonists because they're trapped in their own insanity with their own minds, and because they're so beholden to their secrets, they almost never leave the house at all, and they want people to be prisoners there with them because they feel that they're stuck there. Definitely goes along with a very interesting theme about who's truly trapped: those who are, poor or those who are rich. Does wealth actually free you?
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah,
and the answer is not completely clear.
it's interesting because with the last movie and with this one, I really like the way Wes Craven does world building and the way something like exposition plays into it. Because when I first heard about this movie, I think it was in elementary school. Somebody said, "Oh, have you ever seen The People Under the Stairs?" And I went, "No, I don't know what that is." And they didn't tell me anything about it. And so I thought, "Oh, it's a movie called People Under the Stairs." In my head, I have this picture of a kid moves into a house with his parents and oh, there's something spooky living under the stairs. And, he tries telling his parents about it, but they don't listen to him. And then maybe he's got a crush on the girl who lives next door and they team up to go look for the people living under the stairs or whatever. And
And
I
that's
will
a movie
say,
that would be made today, honestly,
yes.
just with that premise.
It's an adaptation of Goosebumps Blood.
But and then you look at the poster, and I think this has one of the most misleading and maybe worst posters ever, where it's just like a skull over a house, and you're like, okay, what is it? Like that's I think
It
what
doesn't
was
really
going on.
say anything. It looks cool, but it says nothing about the
And
movie.
you watch it, and it's about crazy people, crazy inbred siblings that kidnap children, and then if they don't adhere to their hyper like religious or crazy version of reality, they chop off their tongues or gouge out their eyes or cut off their hands or whatever, and then turn them into cannibals by throwing them under the house. And anytime and it's like the main thing is Leroy's like, all right, fool, we got to go break into this house to get some gold coins. Like that sounds like a SpongeBob plot. Like it's great. And oh, we got to go get those gold doubloons, SpongeBob. Okay, Mr. Krabs, let's do it. And then it's like Squidward's house or something, So it's like something. Yeah, it's absurd. And I'm honestly a little surprised this is not as popular as I thought they might be. Like it doesn't have as big of a cult following as I was maybe expecting. Because tell me if you guys like get this vibe from it. I would expect this to be like really popular with like the geek girl side of things, where like when like
Mm,
a lot of guys too, a lot of guys,
mm,
but
mm,
primarily ladies. When I was like in middle school, really into something like Tim Burton, right? It's like a fairy tale, ooh, but it's dark and twisted, ooh. And then everyone grows up and realizes Tim Burton's not actually that great. And okay, and then people graduate to something like David Lynch, or they graduate into like horror movies and slasher stuff. And I'm just a little surprised that I don't see, because a lot of like ladies I know, again, like 30% of like guys too I know are really into like Disney because they grew up loving Disney, or they love like old movies like adventure movies and stuff like that. This has the vibe of a children's movie, but the aesthetics of an R-rated horror movie, and there's something kind of subversive and like fun about that would kind of scratch a sort of itch that's like kind of childlike. And I don't know
mm.
what it is, but I really find that appealing. And I almost expect the girls who grew up liking like Disney or whatever, who were like also into Tim Burton when they were in middle school, would like this because it's sort of like dark twisted fairy tale, but not, it's more of the
Mm.
horror version of that. So that's just something about this movie that I've kind of had on my mind for a few years. I don't know if I'm just kind of alone on an island with that.
No, I don't think you are. I think one of the reasons why this film doesn't get as much recognition as it does is because, one, a lot of people of our generation don't really watch Twin Peaks, don't really understand what it is. So from a casting perspective, you don't get a whole lot of that. Ving Rhames kind of had his heyday, hasn't had a whole lot of recognition nowadays, although he is a great actor. Um, there's also the fact it's a horror movie in the 90s. Not exactly it's like a toss of whether or not it would get a lot of recognition, especially from a younger crowd, even though it is very accessible to a younger crowd, I think, despite its horror elements. Um, so it's a Wes Craven movie. Wes Craven's not exactly popular with families for various reasons because of his pedigree of working with stuff like, Freddy Krueger, The Hills
Mhm.
Have Eyes. Suddenly you watch a movie that, although it has Spielberg like elements, it's not exactly going to be a banger with families. It's, I guess, maybe from a perspective of why maybe some female, doesn't have as much of a female audience for it. It's because she's not the main character exactly. Maybe it's because it's more of she's a victim that needs to be saved, but she does. That formula is turned on its head as it goes around, and she is able to save herself and actually take agency because
I guess
the
there's
movie
like a
has a
level
great,
of,
yeah.
yeah, no, there's a level of innocence to the main character and to Alice, the sort of somewhat damsel in distress character. Um, because once Fool's there, they have a daughter. To anyone watching who
Mm,
maybe hasn't seen it, but like there's like a level of innocence there that is sort of charming, and that I think does make it feel the most like Spielbergerian. Is that how we say that?
Spielbergian, I guess.
Spielbergian, yeah. But because like there's a part where towards the end, Everett McGill as like the man, like
Mm,
daddy or whatever he is, he says, I know he did it with our daughter. And it's like he's like a 13-year-old kid, you know what I mean? Like he's probably
it-
like barely made it into middle school. And there is like a level of innocence that they don't expect because they're horrible, racist, like classist, all kinds
inbred,
of just, yeah,
yeah.
inbred, hit like crazy people. So um I don't know, I think like again that level of innocence does sort of make it like more accessible. I think you were saying like it is a little like, it's a pretty accessible movie, and
Mm,
I think that
yeah,
might be why.
yeah.
Not where nor anywhere near complicated as his. I think it's just the time that it came out.
Hmm.
Horror was in a big slump at the time. You were coming off the '80s. Slashers were dead and buried for the most part, and we were still 5 years away from Creed, which was the next big like horror movement. Uh, and we're 3 years before Wes Craven's New Nightmare. If you haven't seen, it's also brilliant.
I love
So
that.
it just came out in a time where like horror was kind of dormant, uh, and so it was semi popular when it came out, but it came out in such proximity to the next big thing in horror that I feel like it just kind of got lost.
Okay.
Because Scream was like
It's very omnipresent.
I mean, and Wes Craven. One of my favorite things about him is just how many times he reinvented the entire genre. It's like Nightmare on Elm Street was a pre-hit slasher.
Yeah, I remember very shortly after Wes Craven died, like it was not even a week after, um, Robert Englund and a couple of the actresses from that first um, Nightmare on Elm Street movie, they were at Comic Con in Portland, Oregon, and I went to a screening of uh, the first Nightmare on Elm Street, and afterwards there was a Q&A with Robert Englund and the lady who plays Tina, the first victim of Freddy Krueger, whoever she was. So we had a Q&A with them afterwards, and I was on the Geekvolution Who Reviews the Reviewers competition doing a review for New Nightmare. And so it was really cool to hear a lot of those behind the scenes stories. And I guess Robert Englund like kept in touch with him like throughout a lot of those years. And so it was really neat to hear about kind of the way he was always coming up with ideas to try to do something new, because I guess he realized, you had said it earlier, John, that he didn't really want to stay a horror director. He wanted to do other things. But I mean, your name's Wes Craven. Like that's like a name for horror. And so he had to just keep getting creative with, this was just what he was going to do, he had to like come up with ways to keep himself invested. And I think that shows in something like The Hills Have Eyes and something like this movie and even something like New Nightmare. They're all kind of doing something different.
Yeah. I guess I could call it adventure horror, I suppose, for this particular film.
Yeah. I'm with you there. His final movie, of course, was Scream 4, and I think that is the best Scream sequel. Of course, it's not better than the first movie, but like it's crazy. Just even towards the end of his life, he was still making like fantastic. And making fun of reboots. And the thing I love about Scream 4 is I feel like you had to be alive for a very certain period of horror, from like 2003 to 2009, where all you had was like Nightmare on Elm Street remake, Friday the 13th remake. The Scream 4 is just mocking. This great.
The Platinum Dunes era of horror.
Yeah.
Taking it down.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I really like about this movie is that it's not subtle at all. It's very goofy and silly, but it's not stupid. And that's something I think gets mistaken quite often, is when something's silly, a lot of people will say, oh, then it's kind of stupid. And I think that's fair. A lot of silly things are probably kind of stupid. And I still love them. I can love stupid stuff too. But what I like here is that there is a message that you can track from beginning to end, about like wealth disparity and how something like gentrification happens, and class warfare, like the way like all that is sort of played out. And it's not subtle, it's very kind of simplistic, it's sort of like a fairy tale. And then like at the end you have your sort of distribution of wealth moment where they literally blow up a house. Yeah. And money comes raining from the sky, and
rap music plays or hip hop plays at the end.
This
right thing. Let's talk about the black and white thing.
It's very blatant with what it's saying. Certainly,
this felt like if you took George Romero, Sam Raimi, John Carpenter, and Wes Craven, and they all like threw in creative ideas to make it move. This movie beats you over the head with it, but in a fun way, kind of like a Dawn or Day of the Dead, because they're not trying to be subtle. Like, this is what they have to say. And I appreciated that this movie could be as out there as it is. I mean, you have a guy dancing around in like a BDSM suit, singing, I got him.
Yeah, a guy in a GIMP suit has a SPOS 12 and he's shooting the entire house. It's like, what? And a shotgun that I never see him load. So he just has an unlimited amount of shells in this entire
See, that was like the part of this movie where it's like it just shows you its hand, because like you're watching, you think you know what you're watching. Like, okay, a spooky house movie. Okay, got it. And then Alice says, she's holding her doll, and she's like, he got loose. He's in the walls, and Daddy hunts him. Cut. Here comes Everett McGill to Gibson. And you go,
Yeah.
Whoa, what am I like? Every time I show this to somebody, they go, "What?" It's like that moment that catches you off guard, and it's
Yeah, if
great.
you ever wanted the theming to be obvious, the villain himself is in a bondage suit, so showing that
Yeah,
he's more of a prisoner than anyone else is inside of this house. He
and
can't.
and they talk about that when Grandpa Joe, I think that's his name, Grandpa Joe is giving you the backstory about them, and he's like, "Oh, that brother sister actor here, they mean business." Like, "Oh, brother and sister," and they say, the more money they got, the greedier they got, and like the
Yeah, the
more money.
crazier the god.
Yeah, and so it's just kind of interesting where you think usually you'd think, if you'd be greedier to have more money, and then once you got more money, you'd be less greedy, but that's not the way it plays out. And
No.
because he has like all of that money and he just wants to like he's basically a hermit and a shut-in, like you said, Milton. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it
it's like in a D&D situation where like an older member of this party or something like that brings in the younger guy, the talent, so that we can rob this dragon's hoard of sorts. And it turns out the dragon has like no need for wealth, but he doesn't want to give it away. It's
mhm.
basically this codependent relationship of things that in of itself have no logical connection, but despite that they're still bound together, which is
That's a cool reading and one I never actually really thought about because you comparing it to like a dragon is you're right. It does have like that, Smaug is a very, lecherous um
yeah,
dragon in the Hobbit where he
yeah.
or avarice or whatever the word is.
Avarice is what you yeah.
Yeah. Lecherous is very different. But and the man is
But they
that
are still
way.
lecherous, certainly. Yeah, and usury.
Mhm.
It's like every bad thing you could put in an antagonist and just put them into two people specifically. The bad men, the bad women, put them together in this terrible concoction, and yeah, it was so satisfying to just see them die in this movie.
What did you guys think about? Because I think there was a lot of really fun comedy moments in this. Um, I don't know if there was any moment in particular that jumped out to you, but this movie makes me laugh the whole way through. And it's like the Sam Raimi or Jordan Peele thing where like Wes Craven understands that like being scared and like laughing kind of comes from the same place where a jump scare can get you, but it can also make you laugh, and that's kind of a lot of the jump scares. Make they go, "Oh, that was a jump scare," but it wasn't. It doesn't make you roll your eyes because it's a gag as well, and it kind of makes me laugh.
So just to rewind it a little bit, I went into this completely blind. This is the only Wes Craven movie, one of the few Wes Craven movies I never even heard of. But I knew something was up, not in a bad way, but from the very beginning, because the whole premise of this movie is they if they don't pay the rent within 3 days, because they're just now past due, but they have 3 days to pay triple their rent or they have to get out. And I was like, wait a minute, like I'm not an expert, but that's not how that works.
No, that's criminal.
But what sold me on this movie is the first big case with the dog when they're in the living room. And he dragged Big Raves across the front room, and Big Raves has the dog attached to his wrist, and he just grabs the electric doorknob to shock all three.
It's like that's not
So
how
good.
it was really funny though.
That's what told me exactly what I was in for. So I was like, okay, I'm in. And then the dude in the gift dude showed up, and it took me to another level of what am I in?
I love the part when the kid is like, he's trying to like brace the dog inside of like a little trap door. It's like, man, what are they feeding you? And he like burps up the other guy's ring.
It's like what?
Oh, it was so good.
For me, what laughed, and this is more in retrospect because there is that, which I think is just that's when the comedy bit really sets in of what John described. But for me, what makes me laugh, Spencer didn't die from any other wounds or from a dog or anything like that. He died from just being scared of the people under the stairs, and that to me is probably the funniest thing about it. It's just in hindsight.
You thought that sucker was white before. You should see him now.
Yeah.
By the way, that guy looks like a concoction of a few other people. He looks like Jake Johnson from New Girl and Jurassic World and other stuff,
Mhm.
comedic actor man. He also kind of looks like Wes Craven, and so it's just kind of funny to see him show up. But oh man, one of the gags that I would, because you're right, the shocking all three of them is like a Looney Tunes gag. It's great. But Ving Rhames has so many great one-liners in this. Like when they're talking, like maybe Spencer's in there, looking out, and then he looks at the kid and he says, maybe the president's going to make me Secretary of Pussy.
Ving Rhames' character is such a screw up in this movie. It doesn't take
Yeah.
but a few seconds to think, oh yeah, Spencer's betraying us. He's been there for a few seconds. You know what the plan is. Don't screw anything.
If there was one thing I would change about this movie, I wish he'd been in it more. Because when he died, I was really like,
Yeah.
no offense to the kid, but like it's Ving Rhames. Like, make him the main character.
I slightly disagree, and the reason why is because we had already established, the main character for this movie. If Ving Rhames survives, it's like you have this continual thing of, oh, we can always rely on him for a strong, support character. Taking him out of the movie allows the protagonist to kind of like show his ingenuity and his, resolve throughout the movie, which I think it does very well.
And
but it's Ving Rhames.
Yeah, like you want to see strength. Ving Rhames in like Dawn of the Dead remake.
I think Milton's hitting it on the head, because I think one of the things I like the most about this is it is a coming of age movie. Early on they talk about how you're a fool, but not the stupid kind, the ignorant kind. And so if he always has a Ving Rhames to rely on, then he can't really actualize and kind of take control over the story. And I think that what's great about Ving Rhames is he doesn't outstay his welcome. You love him, and when he's gone, it's sad. But and honestly, like him dying is like end of Act One. And one thing I will say to that point, I guess I'm going to change subjects a little bit here, is I really like the pacing of this movie. It's really fast, but when I was first watching this, what kind of got me on board really quickly is that they're staking out the house and they're talking about breaking in another day. So you're thinking, okay, we're watching the stakeout. We'll have our like meeting where we like break down the plan, Ocean's 11 style, say here's who's doing what, who's doing what, who's doing what, and then we'll come back again, and then but that doesn't happen. Like when they're staking it out, that's when an impromptu break-in happens, and that's when a lot of the movie is like jumped in on, is like right there. Like Act One isn't getting ready to break in. Like in Act One, we're already in the house, like hiding and figuring stuff out. And I think that's a lot of fun and like subversive in a way that is exciting.
Yeah. So the movie popped up just in my head as well, because we were talking about, this is very much a lesser known Wes Craven movie, even though I don't lesser film at all. But I just wonder if this and the original Candy are big influences on Jordan Peele. So I was reading that he's supposed to be producing like a TV reboot of this, which made me roll my eyes. I don't know.
On TV? Oh, interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if this premise works for like a TV show, but maybe.
I was reading that Wes Craven, shortly before he died, was trying to develop a TV show on Sci-Fi Channel. But yeah, no, I think this would be cool as like a comic book miniseries, like just different people who have broken into the house. But for like a show, I don't know. I thought they were like he was producing like a movie remake, and if that was the case, I was excited because, I mean, I've often joked if I was ever given the opportunity, Conner Nielsen, you are going to remake a movie. What are you going to remake? I would have said, oh, People Under the Stairs. Why? Not because I can add anything to it, but when you remake something, it gives more attention to that original, and I just want more people to watch this movie.
Sure.
The other thing I just thought about as well, because I agree this is a coming of age story, and one of my favorite parts that was played more for serious was the relationship between Fool and just down
Alice.
and Alice. I thought they really worked well together, and I've wondering now as well if. I'm a big fan of the first Babysitter movie on Netflix, which is kind of a similar thing about a community where a kid has to deal with deal with like a crazy human threat that's trying to kill him, and he's locked in the house. What if that movie's looking at this too? Because it has the same kind of goofy tone, where you can't take anything seriously, and it's on and up front of. So I'm wondering if there's like movies that have been pulled from this. They just we don't know yet. Like,
Yeah, that sounds plausible. Man, there's so much fun aspects of this that do remind me of something like a Goonies, where yeah, like Alice is I think a really strong character. I like her quite a bit, and seeing her transform through the movie is really cool. Just little things like the way she stands. She always has like her hands up, and just little details like that make this movie feel so particular. I really like Roach, the sort of helpful uh,
Yeah.
man in the walls, and yeah, I really like the way they kind of show off this world, this world of a house and all the little nooks and crannies and gags that they get out of it. Like one of this kind of just another thing I really like about it is like how little dignity is given to the human body in this movie.
Mm.
Um, like oh, Ving Rhames is dead. We're gonna have a moment. No, they're gutting him. They throw him in an open sewer, and oh, Roach got shot. Oh no, like we're gonna have that moment where we get a close his eyes and say a prayer. Nuh-uh. He gets thrown into he gets burnt. His husk gets burnt so they can like smoke out the kids trying to escape through the vents. Like
Yeah.
it's weirdly kind of uh, not nihilistic. It almost adds to like a shocking fun quality to it. And I don't know. There's something about the way like a dead body is just treated like any other thing that's kind of fun.
It really establishes the over the top nature of the villains. It almost makes you take them seriously because, especially, and sometimes the weakness of a lot of these adventure movies is that we can't take the antagonist seriously because the protagonists have to survive. In this movie, we don't feel that because just right off the bat, we show just how brutal and savage these characters are, and they're willing to do just about anything. But they don't. They also establish that the main characters are smart enough to stay away and actually keep some distance between them and their attackers. So yeah.
also, just worth pointing out, go back behind the scenes again. This is only one of 3 movies that he wrote in the '90s. The other 2 being Shocker and Midnight. All the rest were him directing them.
Interesting.
I would have loved to see him write more because I'm looking at his filmography and I love Wes Craven, but like if you've ever looked at his filmography, it's all over the place. Like you've got Hills Have Eyes 2, which I've heard is terrible that he just owned it. But then you've also got like New Nightmare, which I think is one of the best. Like it's right under Scream for like meta slasher. Like it's very much a proto Scream. But I don't think out of everything that I've seen from him, I don't think he's ever written a script. It
Hmm.
it feels influenced by the stuff that like Sam Raimi was doing in the '80s, stuff Romero was doing. Uh, Very out there, and it's not afraid of that. I feel like in under any other director, this would be like, yeah, we know we're like outrageous and silly, and like none of this makes sense, but we're sorry. Like this is what we got, and he's like, no, you're either gonna like this or you're not, and that will make a movie. I love the fact that they're basically just zombies in the basement. Like the third act, zombie.
That glorious shot where it's a close up and you see him pulling the bayonet out. There's all this blood dripping off of it, and then man, this movie's great. I love it. I love the production design you were mentioning earlier, Milton. Like all the different rooms, and they get really creative with the house and all the.
Hmm.
I don't even think the geography actually makes sense if this is like the
No, I don't really think it does. It doesn't matter. I think it
it
looks
doesn't
cool
matter.
anyway.
Yeah, there's way too much room inside this house. When you look at it, it's bigger on the
Yeah.
inside than it is on the outside.
How some just break into the kitchen, I think, is a little ludicrous. But by this point, we're sold on this house being almost its own weird, strange dimension.
Hmm.
So we're so I think the audience is kind of sold on this and doesn't really think about like a detail like that. And it's not so game breaking at the end of the climax because we do have established by this point that the protagonists have grown quite a bit. It's not as if their growth has been dependent on the presence of the people under the stairs in the climax by this point. So I wouldn't say
It,
it compromises anything.
if I do have a problem with this movie, I do think
Mm.
the ending goes on a little too long. Uh, Specifically when like the people start knocking at the door and they could just shoot Fool, but they have to have somebody knock at the door so that they can do the thing. So that and then because what ends up happening is anyone who came in the house just gets locked out of the house again, and then it's like, oh, what? Oh, it's sort of like one of those things where I think a lot of the movie, like 99% of the movie, does a really great job of being sort of like a Rube Goldberg machine where this affects that, affects this, affects that, affects this, and this person can't do this to that person because this is happening, and all these little pieces are in motion, and that's where I think the machinery kind of shows a little bit, and the characters might be just a little too bumbling in order for the kids to be able to get away or something. So
I would. My problem with this movie, ever so slightly, despite the fact that I really enjoy it, Alice has a fantastic antagonist to set against, like deuteragonist versus like deuterantagonist, with her and the woman. Fool, sometimes the man antagonist kind of lacks some depth to it that I think probably could have been there. I mean, Fool has still a great character development. The villain doesn't exactly, match up in the way that it does for Alice, which I
mhm.
feel like if there had been a little bit more there, then it would have been a very great balance between the two.
I can really see that. Yeah.
Granted, he's still entertaining to see on screen, certainly.
Yeah.
So you don't get any lack of that.
I
Hi,
particularly
that's my
liked.
brother Tim, by the way.
Oh, what's up? I
That's fine.
particularly liked his Jim Carrey impression when he's like, "Gotcha."
I loved when the other thing with the dogs between both movies is it also has dog dying, which you don't see a lot in horror too much. Even like a movie like Friday the 13th, like you feel as many like teenagers would want with the dogs off limits.
Well, Wes Craven did a good job with establishing that, yeah, these dogs are part of the antagonist. They're a tool to be used to kill people, which he establishes very quickly throughout the movie. So I think it's allowed in that
But
case.
it just yeah. I mean, I agree. It doesn't bother me like people get all upset like when you kill an animal in a horror movie. I'm like, the horror movie, it's supposed to upset you. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely
but
not in the way that it's in The Hills Have Eyes, certainly,
he
where it
just
is
like
very
takes
upsetting.
a knife to his shotgun and just like starts stabbing the wall.
I love the parts where it's amusing to me when you do have a person like yelling at their dog, like, "Kill, kill, kill," and then before they throw it into they've trained it to kill. That's just kind of amusing to me.
Yeah. And also, what the other thing I love about this movie, especially with movies that are going to be crazy, like Evil Dead 2, this the protagonist lives in like the real world, and they because whatever the conceit is, end up in this like crazy world. So like the world itself doesn't feel insane. It's just these people in like their house is insane.
Hmm.
It's like this weird castle that you see in the distance, like ruling over this peasant village, and like you have this like very established world in there, and then you have this haunted place that has this weird, strange power over everything that it's around. It's only when the people unite that the strange fortress can be destroyed. As you say, kind of like a fairy tale in some ways.
Yeah. Which is what made me think of the Carpenter film because he's got a couple of his early movies that feel very fairy tale like. You've ever seen The Fog? That is very influenced by fairy tale. The whole movie is kind of supposed to be like a guy telling a fairy tale story to people.
Oh, interesting. I feel like it's a requisite that I need to watch that movie because it takes place in Oregon. So I kind of gotta. How many horror movies we have in Oregon? So
Well, do we count the like direct to DVD movies? Because I'm sure I could find a handful.
people
Yeah.
wandering around the woods.
That's like every best to the worst.
Mm.
Yeah.
How about a horror
Yeah.
movie set in Portland? That would be interesting.
Oh, I think Green Room takes place near. They shot it anyways, right up in northern Portland. So
Oh, really?
yeah,
All right.
I actually know quite a few of the crew members on there. Met a few
Really?
who at
That's
least
cool.
know who worked on it. Yeah, that movie's fun. That's a
That,
good movie.
that was a fun movie.
I'll have to check that out. I'll have to check that out.
Look, there we go.
No, I'm kidding. If my mic is coming out, I think anyways. But yeah, I mean, my overall final thoughts are this is a wonderful movie. It made me want to watch more Ving Rhames movies and more Wes Craven movies because I realized I've only seen like the big, Nightmare, Scream, Hills Have Eyes. I really want to check out the original Last House on the Left because I'm curious about that one. I feel like that and Hills Have Eyes are probably his like grimiest, like exploitation movies, and then he got into the '80s and '80s has some of that exploitation stuff, but I feel like it was mostly like slashers. We kind of got away from the like, this is like gross. Like,
Everybody's sweaty. The prettiest people in your movie would be extras in a normal movie, but they're the leads in your movie now.
you got to watch Friday the 13th Part 5. That one is pure exploitation, like Brian felt.
Yeah, that's the good stuff. Yeah, if I had to draft a top 25 favorite movies list, this would probably be on it, personally speaking. I've seen it so many times. The first time I watched it, I probably would have given it like a 3.5, and then every time I watch it, I just like it more and more and more. So I'm giving it a 4.5. I love this movie. I don't think anybody on Earth loves it as much as I do, and that's okay. Because it feels like it almost like belongs to me, and it's my movie, and I love it.
I'm going to give it a 4. I'm just slightly below you. That is also just a first viewing, and I could easily see this going up because this is the kind of tone I love for horror. When you're trying to be like super serious and like, are we scary? No, you're not scary. Like, just stop. Be fun. Be entertaining. That's Romero figured that out. Romero's like Dawn and Day of the Dead are two of the scariest movies I've ever seen because they're not trying to be scary; they're just scared. But yeah, this is a top tier Wes Craven movie that nobody talks about.
I will also give this a 4 out of 5. It's weird enough how consistent our ratings have been throughout both of this double feature. But yeah, I highly recommend it just to any movie watcher. Which you can't really say about a lot of horror movies sometimes, but this achieves a very good balance. So I highly recommend this to people, especially or maybe just people want to watch the adventure genre and want something that has a bit more stakes to it, perhaps. Doesn't seem a bit sappy, but still direct. It doesn't take a whole lot of thought. It's a nice movie to watch with people as well.
This would be a blast. We got to do this for a movie.
Yeah, some of my favorite experiences are showing this to friends and hearing their responses to the outrageous stuff, because you do have like the when Everett McGill first shows up in a GIMP suit. That is like one of those moments where I just do the little side eye check out people's responses, because it's always golden. But I will say, the villains are kind of bumbling, but there's that cleaning house sequence where Alice is getting thrown into the bathtub with like the steaming water, and
that part made me cringe, especially.
Yeah,
that's horrifying and a terrible thing to do to a person.
Yeah, and like Fool is having to help drag Ving Rhames around and like gut him, and it's like traumatizing for him. Like that sequence is like legitimately kind of like terrifying, and I think for a lot of that first half of the movie, the villains sort of feel a little distant, like we're kind of hiding from them, and that's a good sequence that kind of brings them into the fore, and you really get a sense that these are the antagonists of the movie.
Yeah, the bathtub scene made me cringe. It also made me think of like a Stephen King book. Because anytime you have like a teenager character, the parents are always sane people.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I mean, especially because the first time you meet her, and they're still kind of setting the tone. Like her first scene is like, "Where's the fork?" You're not supposed to like leave over. I'm like, okay, what? Like, what? And then immediately they just move into like beating her, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then get like the racism stuff. These as part of the message of the movie of like the bad guys are like racist and they look down on black people and other well mostly black people. That's the one we mainly deal with in the movie. The first time they dropped the N-word, I was like, oh, okay, so it's this kind of movie.
Yeah.
But I think it was tastefully handled. Wes Craven knew what it was.
Yeah, and some of that stuff, like when it does want to touch on serious subject matter like child abuse and racism and classism and all that stuff, it's like the movie knows how to make this stuff around that kind of goofy and quirky and fun and entertaining, but that stuff is serious, and so you never feel like the tone. I'll say this much: this movie handles tone; it juggles tone like a mime or something. It's very talented at juggling all the stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I think that's about it for today. We had more to say about People Under the Stairs, but I think that's because it's a more entertaining movie, not only just to watch, but to pick apart, have fun with. So Milton, are you ready for the week next week where nobody watches because nobody cares about these two movies? That's going to be the episode that I finally get Milton to quit. But yeah, Connor, thanks for hanging out, man. I did pick up the Grindhouse double features, so sometime in the future, who knows, that'll just be an episode because it's technically two movies.
Yeah.
Oh, I want that box. So nice.
Yeah, they have the. Oh, it's so nice. And then you open it up.
Yeah.
And yeah, I
Still
love
wouldn't
it.
say Death Proof is a horror movie, but Planet Terror definitely is.
Both of them, well, specifically Planet Terror, tonally is pretty similar to People Under the Stairs. I'd say it's just very outrageous and goofy, and honestly, probably more overtly comedic too. So
excited to watch those. I've been going through a bunch of Tarantino stuff. But I'm saving those for whenever. So it's like this is my first, prep. But yeah, thanks you guys for hanging out. It's always been fun. Other update I forgot to add at the beginning. Milton and I are almost done with Buffy season 3. So that video should be coming soon, hopefully. Just gotta wait for him to catch up to the season finale. But
shouldn't take too long.
Yeah, we're gonna head out of here. Thanks again, Conner, for hanging out, and thank you everybody for watching.
So much for having me.
Thank you for watching, everyone.